Greetings Guzzlers, we're going to make an Edwardian dish, okay, like a little sort of appetizer. This was from the sort of early 1900s, like I say, Edwardian time, and this is going to be Bloater Savoury with Suffolk Rusks. Now, as you might expect, these were very popular in Suffolk, sort of eastern England, southish. Okay, so before we get into the Bloater Savoury, and I'll tell you what that actually is, it's a fish paste basically, we're going to make the rusks. So for that we're going to want 250 grams of self-raising flour, which I'm just going to sift into this bowl in a second. We want half a teaspoon of sea salt, and then you'll want 120 grams of softened butter, 1 beaten egg, and about a tablespoon of milk. Okay, so we're going to assemble that, we're going to roll it, cut and bake them, and then we will get on to the savoury. So let's get started. So here's my flour. I'm just going to put that salt into there, and we're just going to sift that through into the bowl. Okay, now your butter will want to be softened. Mine's still a little bit hard, so we're going to let that soften a bit more. You'll want your oven on at 200 degrees in a pan. Okay, now to start with, we're going to make the rusks, but you're going to need twice the amount of baking sheets, because we're going to cut them in half part the way through cooking. So I've got one baking sheet ready, but I'm prepared for my second. Alright, just ain't got enough bloody room in here. So let's get this all sieved through. Like I say, the only other ingredients you're going to want a bit of flour to roll it on, but you want an egg, a beaten egg, and a bit of milk, and a 5cm cookie cutter. Okay, and obviously a rolling pin. So when I've got that ready sifted, we'll move on to adding the rest. So in goes my butter. Okay, and what we're going to do now is we're now just obviously going to rub this through to get our sort of breadcrumby texture. Okay, now I've got one egg, like I said, which we'll beat, and we'll be stirring that in once we've done this bit, and a tablespoon of milk, but we add enough milk obviously to make a nice sort of stiff dough that we can roll, but obviously we don't want it too wet. So when I said I'll tell you a little bit more about bloater savoury when we come to make it, these are rusks which were traditionally made to go with this bloater savoury. So a bloater savoury is made from a bloater. Now a bloater is basically smoked herring. Now you might say, well, that's a kipper. Okay, but there is a difference. Yes, a kipper is a smoked herring, but traditionally a kipper, the herring is gutted and smoked without its innards. A bloater, you basically smoke the whole thing, guts and all, and hence they quite often used to bloat up a bit before you got round to the smoking process, hence the term bloater. Okay, now unfortunately I haven't been able to get hold of any bloaters, so an alternative which I'm using, and you can use as well, is some smoked mackerel. So we'll be using that in place of our traditional bloater. Okay, and you'll want some egg yolks, 2 egg yolks. You'll want some lemon juice, and a little bit of butter. However, this is a hot savoury paste, and by hot I don't mean comes out of the oven or out of a pan. It's hot because we're going to be adding some Lee and Perrins Worcestershire sauce, okay, Worcestershire, and also some cayenne pepper. So that's why we mean hot. Okay, so like I say, this was a popular little dish. You would traditionally have this bloater savoury served on your Suffolk Rust. So we're almost ready for that to go move to the next stage. I'm just going to finish off mixing in that butter, and then we'll get the egg and milk in. So beaten up 1 egg, and in that goes. And I'm just going to mix this in as well as we can before we start adding the milk. I should probably have to get my hands in here again. Okay. And that really is all there is to this rusk. Okay. Like I say, we're going to roll it about 2 centimetres thick, bake it, and then slice it. That'll be fun getting that right. In half, and then basically we bake again, cut sides up. Okay, hence the reason why you'll want double the So I'm just going to add some of that milk, and so all I'm going to do now is I'm just going to get this into a nice stiff but pliable dough. So I used about half that milk in the end. Okay, and like I said, what we're going to do now is we're just going to roll this out, but we want it about 2 centimetres thick. Okay, because if you remember, we're going to cut these in half, so you're not actually going to get an awful lot out of there. I don't even think that's 2 centimetres, is it? I think it's a bit narrower than that. So, like I say, we're going to cut these out, and then I'm just going to put them onto a baking sheet, which I conveniently haven't put the sheet onto yet. Okay, if you're not going to use a silicone sheet like that, you might want to grease it well. You want to space them, okay, give them room to move a bit if you like. Okay, so I'm just going to get this re-rolled and cut a few more, and then we put it in the oven. If you remember, I said 200 degrees Celsius for a fan oven, and we're going to bake them for about 10 minutes. So there we go, they're going to go in the oven, like I say, 200 degrees for 10 minutes. Okay, and then we're going to remove them, and that's when we're then going to slice them in half and lay the, one half out onto a different baking tray. So I'm just going to get my second tray ready, and then we'll perhaps start on our Bloater Savoury. They've had 10 minutes. So what I'm now going to attempt to do, could be fun, which it might be easier I think with a serrated knife. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to slice these in half, a bit round. Okay, and I'm just going to then obviously transfer the new half, cut side up, onto the new tray. Okay, and then when they're done, we'll be ready to go back in the oven. So they're now cut in half. They're going to go back in. Now turn the oven down slightly to 180, and they're going to go in for about another 10 minutes, but this time we want them nice and crisp and golden brown. Now when they prepared this in obviously Edwardian times, they wouldn't have a blender or anything. They would break all this up. So I've already removed the skin from the fish. Okay, and what they would do is then they would push it along with everything else through a sieve, which the sieve I've got this ain't going through. So what I'm going to do is I'm now just going to break up this fish a little bit more. Well, I'm just going to put it into my blender, and I've tried to remove most of the bones. To be honest, I didn't find very many. There's probably a lot of little ones in there. Don't tell Phil, although he won't eat this anyway. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to blitz that down a little bit, add that, and then we're going to add in that butter, 60 grams of softened butter. So I had about 4 smoked mackerels there, by the way. So I've given it the chance to break down a bit, and all I'm going to do now is I'll put that butter in there. I suspect I might take this out of here and do some of this by hand, probably a little bit too much for this little mini blender, probably not quite enough to go in the big blender, to be honest. So I'm just now going to try and blend that butter through. And remember, the only other things, we've got 2 egg yolks, I've got a tablespoon of lemon juice, I've got a teaspoon of, is it a teaspoon? Yeah, 2 teaspoons of Worcestershire sauce and 2 teaspoons of cayenne pepper, and that obviously will go in there as well in a bit. So just going to get the butter mixed in. Whoa, that's fun. Just trying to make a bit more room here. My rusks, 5 minutes off coming out. I'm just going to have to give this a little bit of a mix up before we can add the remaining ingredients. So I'm now going to add in the egg yolks, the Worcestershire sauce, the cayenne pepper and the lemon juice. And then we're now just going to mix all that. That's that on there. Get that off of there. Get that off of there. We're now just going to blend all that together. Now the fish by now is actually blending up quite fine, so if necessary we don't need to do any more. We could take it out and just mix it all by hand. Alright, so let's just finally get that blended together. So that's my rusks out of the oven now. We're just going to let them cool before we put them on a wire rack. And I'm just getting my Bloater Savoury out of the dish. Does just look like fish paste, which is essentially what it is. Okay, so when they cool a little bit, we'll have a little taster. I might have a taster of this beforehand, but then we'll have a little taster on a rusk. I mean, they are pretty plain biscuits type rusk things. You'll want them with something. You could have them with cheese. Okay, it's quite nice with cheese. But there you go. There's our Bloater Savoury, our cooling Suffolk Rusks. So we'll do a little taste session in a bit. There's one of the crusts that didn't quite cut in half properly, and some of the Bloater Savoury. So the rusk is pretty nondescript. Obviously very, very fishy. Well, you know, the savoury. But then suddenly that cayenne pepper comes through. There's a bit of the rusk, not the cayenne pepper. Excuse me. So the rusk does take some of that heat from that cayenne, you know, from the savoury for it away. But very tasty. If you like fish and you like a bit of heat, you'll love this. Oh, Edwardian Bloater Savoury with Suffolk Rusks.